All right. Well, good morning. How are you guys? Are the kids in the room? 3. All right. I thought kids get more excited at, let me see, wave your arms and yell something if you're kindergarten through 5th grade. Who is that? Let's see. We got a few. You guys are the coolest part of today, not the adults in the room. You know, it's you guys. So we're so glad that you're in here. I'm excited. We're going to, kids, today, I'm going to talk to your parents. I hope you get to hear something as well. And we're going to end with something. We're going to have 2 challenges that we're going to end with, okay? So if all the kids in the room, I need to make sure at the end of it, you're listening so that you can also help challenge mom and dad with what we're going to do this week, okay? For everybody else, hey, welcome to Be Generous. This is our 4-week series that we're about ready to kickstart. I'm not going to tell you everything about what we're going to do because every Sunday builds on each other. Let me begin with kind of a concept that. To build a foundation, I want to lay out a story. Some of you probably heard, but I want to kind of help you understand. A number of years ago, I had the opportunity to travel to Kenya. Okay, and so when I went to Kenya, there's this moment. I'm a child sponsorship director at this time. I'm kind of in between. I just got out of a student ministry that I had been for a long time. I'm trying to think through like what is it that God has me to do. So in this like weird time of my life, I was a sponsorship director. So in that, I had to go over to a desert area in Kenya, which was hilarious because when I got off the plane, I remember a few days later, I had to get onto another plane in Africa. And I'm sure Africa's standards aren't as high as our standards of planes, okay? And so I'm going to the airport. They didn't really need anything. There's hardly any security at this thing. And we walk in, and it's like going to a house. That was the place that we went into to hang out inside this house. And then when you look at the outside of it, this is where all the planes are. And the planes look like they were built in like the 60s and the 70s. And I'm like, I got to get on one of those. I'm going to die. Like, this is going to be my life. I don't know if you're afraid of flying. I typically am not. But when I look at the plane I'm about to get on, I'm not going to lie, the butterflies started happening. And I thought, if we're going to die, I just want to make sure we crash so hard that I don't feel it. Like that's what I'm thinking. And so we get on this. I want to say that it was a 15-seater airplane that was just propellers, and that was it. No air conditioning on this thing, and I'll just say this: as soon as we got off in the air, they turned the music on. It happened to be at this time March, and we were listening to Christmas music. Like, that was the music we were listening to, so we could land in a desert. So, and then on the way there, it starts to rain. Does anybody know how much it rains in a desert? Hardly ever, right? I know, if you didn't know that, that's hardly ever. There's no water in a desert, hardly. And so it happens to rain, so the runway that we're going to land on is gravel and wet mud. So they're just like, oh, this might feel a little bumpy, probably. So I'm like holding on, scared out of my mind, and we land in this plane. And then they don't want us to get out because on the part of the side of the airplane that we get to get out, there's rushing water going right by us. They're like, this is weird. This has never happened, And it's like, of course, it happens today. So anyways, I obviously lived, but I remember, though, getting off the airplane for the very first time into Kenya. This isn't my first trip to Africa, but I remember getting off the airplane, and I don't know if you guys know this, I'm white, so Kenya's not, and I knew that I was going to be stopped. I knew I was. So I have 2 big suitcases coming in, and I know that this is going to be a possibility. You know, it's like, I don't know if you've ever been to an airport or gone through like security or anything like that, but you kind of, when you get off, you try to not make eye contact with anybody that you think is going to look at you. Has anybody ever done that? You know, and so you're like, because if you make eye contact, man, you're done. So I tried not to make eye contact, and they're like, oh, sir. I'm like, dang it. So I have like, okay, let's go. You know, like nobody else is white around me getting off the plane. So I get off, and they're like, sir, we need to check your luggage. Absolutely. I stand back, and I let them check my luggage. 1 suitcase is mine. The other suitcase is the information that we need to take pictures of children for the ministry that we have. So with that, there's a number of computers, there's a number of cameras, there's also things for the in-country missionaries and people who work for the organization that I work for. So they were like, sir, are you going to be giving this away or selling this at any point? No, absolutely not. Are you going to be giving this to anybody while you're here? And the answer is no, I really am not. And they're like, we don't believe you. Okay. So it was just this constant, like, I promise you, I'm here. I showed him what I do. Like, I'm here to take pictures. I'm here to help. We're going to this place in Kenya. I'm going to be staying in Nairobi for a while, but then we're going to get on a plane. We're going to go here, things like that. And I had to, for 15 minutes, just tell them that everything in this suitcase is not staying here. We need to use this stuff. And so then finally he's like, okay. So then he opens up my other suitcase. Tears it open, and that's all my stuff. And so, like, I'm there for 2 weeks. So I have everything. We got professional travelers here. You roll your clothes. Everybody know what I'm talking about? Okay. And do we have any vacuum? Like people who like make shh? Anybody like that? Okay. Over we go. You guys are super professional. Like I'm not. I just roll. So everything from my jeans to my shirts to my underwear, like I'm rolling it. Right? Because I needed to get it in there. And he said, sir, where is this going? He said, this is going with me. Who are you going to be giving this to? And I said, no one. These are my clothes. And he kept saying, no. How many of these clothes are you going to give away? And so I'm just like, no, these are my clothes. These are my clothes. About 7 or 8 minutes into that conversation, he says to me, no one has this many clothes. And I thought, well, that's an interesting thought. But I had to convince him these are mine. And he says, no, you're going to be giving these away. I'm like, sir, look at me. At this time, I'm a large, extra large. You know, like I was training for a half marathon at this point, so I'm a little slimmer than I am now, okay? So I'm telling him, like, I have a large and extra large shirts. Like, if you open all of my clothing, you're going to see it's all the same size. These are my clothes, I promise you. So he did. He unraveled all of my clothes to look at the tag so that to see the same size of shirt. And so I was there for 45 minutes trying to convince this guy, airport security in Nairobi, Kenya, that this stuff is all mine. And so finally he says, okay, you're good to go. So I had to roll all of my clothes back up and put them in the suitcase. I walk out, and the missionaries there that were there to get me were like, so you got stopped, huh? I sure did get stopped. So anyways, when I got there, our job was to make sure that we take pictures. And so these are some of the pictures that I got and had fun with. This is a schoolroom. Of just like you can't see it, but there's another wall right here, and they're all compacted into this room. Obviously, 10, no air conditioning. It was so hot in there. This is out in the desert area. This is when I have a little bit of hair, right? So but this is out there when I'm out there with the kids. These are all kids that I would have taken pictures of, and these are all kids who are Muslim. And building that, and I'll talk about that some other time. And these are the slums of Nairobi. I was going to show you other pictures, but there are kids in here today. But there are some really incredibly nasty things running through homes and right through where people eat and make food and live. I tell you all that, I share that story to begin with, is to help you to understand where we're going. I want to play a game with you, all right? You all have to participate. Kids in the room, are you guys ready to participate? Come on, everybody's got to participate. This is the part of the game. So when I say something, I need you to raise your hand if this is true for you, okay? You gotta play along. And if you don't play along, then we're going to point you out. No, I won't do that. But if you're at home, if you're driving, you got to play along as well because you get one arm on the steering wheel. Okay, so here we go. How many of us, when you raise your hands, how many of us would say that you own 1 week's worth of clothing? How many of us in the room would say that they own a week's worth of clothing? Okay, all right. Keep them up. I want you to keep them up. Okay, this excludes underwear, okay? How many of you own 2 weeks worth of clothing? Like if you didn't do any laundry, you have 2 weeks worth of clothing. This is fun. Look around, everybody. How many of you would say you own 3 weeks worth of clothing? I know, I think I do. I mean, like, how many of you would say that you wear your jeans twice before you wash them? Anybody in the room? Right, twice. So you got some extended wear. Okay? Okay. All right, put your hands down. How many of us, listen to what I'm about to say, how many of us have a house for our car? A house for our car, AKA garage. How many, you're like, oh, I didn't know what he's talking about, right? Okay? How many of you have a house for 2 cars? Okay? All right. I do too. That's why my hand's still up. Okay? All right, there you go. Okay. I noticed the hands are like, you know what? I don't know if I want to go as high right now. Like kind of getting low. Make loud and proud, okay? How many of us own a faucet in our house? You have a faucet in your house. All right, this is going to get crazy. You ready? How many of us own 2 faucets in our house? Anybody? All right, we got some. Everybody who's got, yeah, right, okay. So kitchen, bathroom, all right. How many of us own more than 2 faucets in our house? Man, you guys are rich. All right, here we go. How many of us have 1 bed per child? 1 bed per child. Okay, if you're like, well, I'm just a grandparent now. How many of you would have, at once upon a time when you were kids, had 1 bed per child? 1 bed per child. All right. Man, goodness gracious. And this is going to be really fun. How many of us own a plane? That you actually can fly. That takes gas. Okay. I noticed your hands didn't go up, and you're like, oh, thank goodness, because I thought I was getting rich here for a second, but now I'm not rich. That's a fun little game. I want us to think through those perspectives as we go about today and the weeks to come, because I want you to understand some of the things that we're going to talk about. This is all about perspective today. The point of Be Generous is to talk about the critical understandings of biblical generosity. Okay, I wish I could hit the reset button on our views of Christianity and money, because there's horrible examples in our world when it comes to Christianity and money. In fact, the way that the world sees American churches and American Christianity, they think of prosperity gospel. They think of the ones who are out there trying, the Joel Osteens of the world. That's what the world thinks of America when it comes to Christianity. Unfortunately, that's not a picture, though, of Christianity. That is a picture of some kind of offset of Christianity, religion, and things like that. But the essence of the gospel is so much more than when it comes to generosity, that I'm afraid that most reasons why money has such a difficult part in our culture when we think of religion, when we think of faith, when we think of God, is that because we don't have a clear understanding of my walk with Jesus, or we don't understand the biblical understandings of following Jesus and understanding generosity when it comes to that. So what I want to do is I want to help us understand those things over the next few weeks. So our series is called Be Generous, but the tagline is God gave, therefore we are to give. God gave, and because he gave, we are to give. And in a sense, what does that look like? So every Sunday from this point on, over the next 3 weeks, including today, or I should say not including today, so the next 3 Sundays after today are building off of one another. I'm just going to lay a foundation today that it's not going to, like if you come next week, you're going to realize why this week was really important because of what we're going to be doing next week. And I'm going to tell you next week, I'm beyond excited about. And I really hope that you make next week a priority in being here. At the same time, I'll say this, our kids are going to be in here with us one more week next week too, because we want them to experience what we're going to be doing next week as well. So let's begin with Jesus' greatest message. Everybody with me? All right, kids, you guys ready? We're going to dig into one of the most important messages that Jesus taught. It's found in the book of Matthew, which is the very first letter written in the New Testament. This is about the life of Jesus, and it's Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Everywhere Jesus would have gone, he would have taught the same thing everywhere he would have gone to. To Jews, to Samaritans, to Gentiles, he would have taught the same thing everywhere he went. And right smack dab in the middle of his message, he talks about this. Now, I need you all to understand this too. Kids, I want you to understand, if you're ever in school and they talk about Jesus, you can give them this idea. The number one thing Jesus talks about, more than anything, prayer, heaven, hell, salvation, the number one thing that he talks about the most that is written down is money. Because it is the one thing that will keep us separated from him. And many Christians, if we're not careful, we buy in to that culture. We buy into money, hook, line, and sinker, more than we do Jesus. And it is the most important thing that he wants to get us across. So in Matthew chapter 6, right in the middle of his message, he says this, starting in verse 19. He says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth." He says, do not do this. In fact, here's what I want you to know. This is a Greek phrase right here. This whole section, this part right here is a Greek phrase, and it actually is this: don't treasure treasures. It's a play on words. He's saying, don't treasure treasures. In fact, the word treasure here is where we get the English word thesaurus. Has anybody read a thesaurus? The nerds in the room are like, yeah, that was me, man. Yeah, right? I love words, you know? So has anybody ever seen the memes and stuff like that where you're on there and you're reading these words and like one word will be this way and then the very next word, you just change the first letter of the consonant and it changes the sound of the word? English is dumb, right? It just is one of those... I don't know what happened to us years and years and years ago, but we thought, this is a good idea, you know, let's just spell it this way. So anyways, so the English word that we have for thesaurus is the same word as treasure. So basically, thesaurus means a treasury of words. And he's saying, don't treasure treasures. So don't hoard treasures, goods, and money. Are you all with me? Don't hoard treasures, goods, and resources. That's what he's saying right here. Don't hoard those things. Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. I know I've lost some of you there. Right? Because you don't think about the eternal. Like, this is a good word, this is a good saying, but like, Jesus is saying, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. I'm not going to be there for 60 years. Does that make sense? Like, this is what he's trying to help us understand here. Where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. In other words, here's what he's saying. Use your money, use your goods, use your resources right now for the kingdom. Use your resources, your goods, and your money right now for the expansion of God's kingdom on earth. That's what I want you to use your treasures for. And he says, and when you do these things, you're actually paying yourselves in heavenly dollars. Does this make sense? Like, I know in our world, like, I don't know if I can buy into this, but this is what he's saying. Don't use your money for you right now, because this isn't about building your kingdom. This is about building his kingdom. And so he's saying, I want you to use your money, your resources, the things that you have, and I want you to use them right now to build God's kingdom on earth. And when you do that stuff, you're going to be paying yourself back long term. When you get there to be with him, that's when you're going to receive your inheritance. That's what he's saying. That's what I want you to do. If you aren't doing that, here's what you're doing. You're building your kingdom. That's what he's saying. And then in verse 24, he says this. This is one of the hardest verses in the entire Bible. He says, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. This is important. You cannot serve God and wealth. This is it. What do you think Jesus talks about the most? Because you have one of two masters. But Nate, I prayed a prayer of salvation. Okay. Okay. Let me ask you a question. When you think about understanding what Jesus is saying, is it something that you're willing to investigate in when it comes to your own life? Let me get this right. The issue isn't when it comes to the question, what do you own? Okay, go to the next slide. The issue isn't what do you own? This isn't the issue. What do you own? The issue becomes who owns you? It's not what do you own? It's who owns you? Or more importantly, maybe the next question is this: who's your master? Are you with me? Like, this is huge. Have you become, in a sense, a slave? I need you, adults in the room, please listen to me in this moment. Have you become a slave to your lifestyle? Have you become a slave to your pursuit of that lifestyle? Have you become a slave to culture? Or are we slaves of the master? Are we kingdom-minded? Are we willing to sacrifice for kingdom growth? And I really want you to think about that. Are we willing to sacrifice for kingdom growth? I'm going to share two quotes today that are just absolutely challenging, but it has the point of what I'm trying to get to as well. John Piper, a former pastor, many years, a pastor, but he's also he's currently a speaker, he's an author, and I don't agree with everything he says, but I love the guy. Man, that guy is on it. He is super passionate about Jesus and the kingdom. Look what he says. He says, quit being satisfied with the little 2% yields of pleasure that get eaten up by, look at this, moths of inflation and the rust of death. Whew. I wonder what that message would have been like to sit under. Invest in the blue chip, highly yield, divinely insured securities of heaven. Giving your life to material comforts and thrills is like throwing money down a rat hole. But a life invested in the labor of love yields dividends of joy unsurpassed and unending. Isn't that good? But that's challenging, though. And I think a lot of Christians sit here and be like, yeah, absolutely, that makes total sense. So if we all came, now I'm not going, please hear me, I'm not going to ask us to do this. And if we all came up and just stood in front of everybody and we told everybody our budget, would you be proud of your budget? Would you be proud of how you spend your money? Could you do that? And almost all American Christians could not do that because we are so focused on the 2% yields of pleasure rather than the life-giving understandings of generosity for the growth of the kingdom. All right, so I want to read to you something really important. So in 1 Timothy, this is the Apostle Paul. If you don't know who he was, at one time he used to kill Christians. He was against the church. He was a Pharisee. He was a devout Jew, right? He was a devout Jew of the people way back when. And he did everything he could to get rid of Christianity. He did everything he could to put down people who followed Jesus. Okay? He would kill them, he'd imprison them, he would beat them up, he would do all these things, okay? And so eventually, Jesus gets a hold of him. It's an incredible story. And then his life is turned around and perhaps becomes one of the greatest, if not the greatest, in my opinion, missionary in the world. And in fact, for years to come, for centuries to come, right? We're still reading his letters. And so in that, he begins to, as he's learning and as he's growing, he begins to train up others as well. He's training up other leaders in the churches all over the known area. He's training up young people to do this. And one of those guys, his name is Timothy. Timothy, he's a young pastor in the city of Ephesus working with the church in Ephesus, right? This is who Timothy is, and he's really young. But he's saying, I want to make sure I train you, equip you, and help you to do the things that I want you to do. And look what he writes young Timothy just in preparation for him to live this way and to teach the things that Paul's teaching him to the church. Okay? And so in chapter 6, verse 6, he says this, yet true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. Let me read that again. Yet true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. He goes on to say, after all, we'll come back to that. After all, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave it. Doesn't that make sense? I mean, how many of you are like, yo, right, I mean, I want to throw all this stuff in my coffin, baby. It's going with me. And then 500 years later, we dig you up. We're like, oh, there it is, right? But you can't take anything with you. So if we have enough food and clothing, he says, let us be content, which gets me back to my story. So when I'm standing there in front of this guy, in the Nairobi airport, and he says to me, nobody has this much clothing. He's right. Nobody in Kenya has this much clothing. Actually, 2/3 of the world's population doesn't have that much that I had in my suitcase that day. Perspective, right? Let us be content. So let's go back to verse 6. Yet true godliness with contentment and great wealth. Let's break that down. Godliness. He begins with say, yet true godliness. What is godliness? Godliness is this, conforming to God's character. That's what godliness is. Godliness is conforming to God's character. Well, what is God's character like? Then you should be reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Right? Because Jesus says, whenever you've seen me, you've seen the Father. We should be looking at Jesus' example of what godliness looks like. Now, yes, you can also go back to the Old Testament and you can see how did God do that. Like there's a number of things that God could have ended the lives of people on. King David is one of them. God had a right to have King David killed because of his major sin that he had because it went against the law. But what did he do? He didn't kill him. What's that called? Grace. Mercy. Right? Godliness. Godliness is conforming to God's character. So then what is contentment? Contentment, it means complete self-sufficiency. That's what this word. In fact, the word contentment here is a word that Paul borrowed from the philosophy of the day. That's what he borrowed. So he's talking about a contentment, that a word that they would have understood as complete self-sufficiency. Now, if I take out godliness, doesn't this sound like our culture? Everybody with me? Isn't this our culture today? Right? What do we tell each other? That the truth is in you. That whatever you believe truth is, that's what it is. Truth in and of itself is relative. according to our culture. Whatever you want to be, that's who you get to be, right? And you find truth and fulfillment inside you. And so he's using this word, and you're like, well, why would Paul use that word then if that's what it means? Oh, but don't forget. What does he start with? Godliness. So he's saying that the answer is godliness plus understanding contentment equals what? Great wealth. The answer isn't in you. The answer is the God living in you. Are you with me? This is the point that he's trying to wrestle with. It has to begin here. So contentment comes out of a lifestyle that you and I are to live in understanding with one another and our relationship with our Heavenly Father. That in a relationship with our Heavenly Father, we can learn how to be content because godliness is our measure. Godliness is what we're trying to attain, to get. Like everything that we desire is godliness, and in the godliness, I can learn how to be content with all that I have. And so then it goes on to say, but people who long to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires. Let me look at that again. People who long to be rich, if that is your desire, to be rich, I'm going to go ahead and just tell all of you in the room, every single one of us living in the room, we're rich. Okay? I know you're like, well, I don't feel rich. I understand that. But you're rich. Because can I tell you who the Bible was written to? The world. Not American Christians. So when we have the perspective that we do, when we read the scriptures, and you can say, man, but I'm not as rich as those people down the road. Hey, why don't you jump on a plane with me? I'll go show you something. Hey, why don't we get in the car? We'll go downtown. I'll show you something. You ready? It's incredible to understand. And this has nothing to do with rich people or poor people. If wherever you are in the economy, wherever you are in desiring money, wherever you are and whatever it is that you make, all across the world, he's saying people who long to be rich, poor and rich alike, whoever long to be rich, fall into temptation and are trapped. What are they trapped by? Foolish and harmful desires. What does that do? That plunge them into ruin and destruction. For, this is one of the most important but out of context scriptures that we use. For the love of money. This word is actually greed. For the love of money, what does it say? Is the root of all kinds of evil. So if we desire stuff, and not only that, but if we desire stuff for our children, like we want our kids to have a good life, but if we're desiring for them to have the best of the best, and you're willing to do whatever it takes to get them, whatever that materialistic thing is, the root of that desire, what does it do? A root is what? It's part of a tree, it's a part of a bush, and eventually as that thing grows, what is it going to do? It's going to produce fruit, right? So he's saying that this desire that we have to want money, want the resources, want the material things of the world, that's going to burst into some kind of tree, and we're going to continue to water that tree, and it's going to produce fruit that is harmful in desire, and it will lead to destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some people, craving money, have wandered from the true faith and have pierced themselves with many sorrows. Again, who has you? It's not what do you have. Who has you? Are you all with me? Okay, come on. Are you guys with me? Like, I feel like you're like, I don't know, man. It's quiet out there. I get it. This is one of the hardest messages, but it's also the reason why Jesus teaches us the most. okay? And today, again, I want to remind you, we're just building a foundation today because we want to do some really cool things long term, but you got to understand, who is your master? Does God have you, or does your lifestyle have you? Does God have you, or does your pursuit of whatever it is have you? Who has you? Because whoever has you is going to be where you end up. Because that's the point. You can't serve two masters. So based off of a number of the studies that I've done, people I've listened to, books I've read, things like that, I want to give you 5 truths that help maintain a content heart, okay? I want to give you 5 truths that can help you maintain a content heart. And again, whatever you do with them is what you do with them, because as a Christian, you have to work out your faith, you have to work out your salvation, and the reality is that do you want to work out your salvation, or do you want to continue doing what you've always done to continue to see the same results you're always going to get? Okay? So 5 truths that help maintain a content heart. And number 1, recognize that the Lord owns everything. We have to recognize that the Lord owns everything. What we have is not ours, but His. Are you all with me? Parents, this also includes your kids in the room. Like, man, they are wonderful, and I love my kids. But you are, at the end of the day, stewards of your children. Like, you just are, because they're His. He created them. And so we have to teach and train them those things, the priority of that. This is why Jesus gets so passionate about how we treat and teach children. Like, He is super, uber passionate about those things, to the point where it's super scary if we lead our kids in another direction. Like, that's how serious He is. But everything that you have, your cars, your house, your resources, the things you have in your home, everything that you have is His. If you're a follower of Jesus, you believe and should believe that everything that you have is His. And so the question you have to ask yourself is do I use everything that I have for the glory and the goodness of God and expansion of His kingdom? Or my kingdom? I've worked hard for what I have. I can't tell you how many of men I've talked to about this. I've worked hard for what I have. And it's funny because Deuteronomy tells me, oh, but by the way, the reason that you have the gifts and the ability that you have to do what you're doing is given to you by the Lord. And so the question you're going to have to wrestle with is that what if tomorrow, I don't want this to happen to anybody, but what happens if tomorrow you wake up and that's gone? Now what do? Everything that you have is His. And we are to steward and use it for His glory. Number 2, maintain a thankful heart. Maintain a thankful heart. Be grateful even if you have a little. This is good. Because I don't care how poor you are or how rich you are. Be thankful for what you have. This is important in all circumstances. I can tell you, I've gone to, like I said, I've gone to Kenya, I've gone to Uganda, I've gone to the DR, I've gone to Haiti, and it doesn't matter how much you have or what you have, you are to be thankful for what you have and not desire something else or something more. Be grateful for what the Lord has given you already. Number 3, learn to distinguish between wants and needs. Learn to distinguish between wants and needs. Like, I can't say this enough, because here's what we do. Most American Christians, because ultimately this is my audience today, we spend most of our life on this. And then when we complain because we have to spend money on this. Right? This is important. We must distinguish between wants and needs and set our life accordingly. Number 4, spend less than what you make. That's a big idea right there, right? Woo! Spend less than you make. This allows you to invest into eternal purposes. So when you get that raise, don't be like, all right, let's go bigger. No, stay smaller, because what is your perspective? Are you building God's kingdom or are you building your kingdom? Now, I'm not saying that you can't live in a better home or have a nicer car, but understand the perspective of what you're spending your money on, and does it hurt when it comes to wanting to make a difference in this world? If it does, then don't spend it on the things that you want. And number 5, worship the Lord with integrity. Make sacrificial giving a way of life. And I know this is a new concept for Christians as well. See, that was a joke for me, but I know it's not a joke for you. You know what I'm saying, though? Like this is all over the New Testament. In fact, this is all over the Old Testament. Like this is the point that we're trying to get at. Worship the Lord with integrity. Therefore, in doing so, make sacrificial giving a way of life. Let me give you just a quick example. So one of the things that Liz and I do, like we are 10% givers when it comes to the local church. Sometimes we give a little bit more than that, depending on what time of the year or what we're doing in that year. And we also give above and beyond that to other things. We support LifeWise. We have a child that we sponsor. We help support some other local ministries, and we have money set aside to help other family members that we come across, or other people that we come across with, sometimes at the store, sometimes when we're out just shopping and whatever the things. Sometimes it's to help the people in our church, and we have all those things. Now, is anybody with me that you're experiencing the inflation and all the things that have taken place in our world? Come on, is anybody with me? Do you know what we've decreased? Our debt payments. Not our giving. Why is that? Because we have an eternal perspective in our house. Our goal is the kingdom, not my kingdom. So I don't decrease what I give out. I decrease how much I'm putting on debt. That's what we do. Now, ultimately, the goal is to live debt-free. But the reality is that when we have to make hard decisions, we don't make decisions about the kingdom. We make decisions about what other things that we're spending our money on. Because it's about an eternal perspective. Let me say this. John D. Rockefeller says this: the poorest man I know is the man who has nothing but money. Read that again. The poorest man I know is the man who has nothing but money. And let me end with this quote. This is a hard one. This comes from Pastor John MacArthur. This is a good one. He says this: perhaps the saddest observation of all is that the spending habits of people in the church differ little from those of the world. The lifestyles of most professing Christians are not substantially different from anyone else's. He goes on to say, too many in the church have adopted the world's indulgent attitude toward money. Almost every form of materialistic extravagance and excess has found its way into the fellowship of believers. It is as if the church has forgotten Jesus' mandate to invest in eternity. All right, we'll see you later. That's hard, isn't it? You know, statistics speaking, I've said this before, that in the evangelical church, we're an evangelical church. And all that means is that we are Bible-believing followers of Jesus. There's really not a true definition of what that looks like other than people who take Jesus' word seriously, okay? And in that, the evangelical church, it's amazing the things that we could do. Like right now, we're on a historic time of the country between two candidates that we're going to have to vote for, right? And here's the funny thing: most evangelicals don't even vote. And you wonder why there's so many problems in the world. It's because evangelicals don't vote, right? The second thing comes to this: is the reason that there are so much horrible poverty situations and the things that people go through in our culture is because evangelicals don't give. I don't understand. 2 to 4% of our income is what evangelicals give away. 2 to 4%, and that's on average, which means most evangelicals don't give or give very little. I've always told people, I heard a pastor once say this too on a church I was at. We were at a really big church and we're serving there. And I remember he got up from the congregation. He said to his whole church, he says this. He says, we would never ever have to ask the church for money if all Christians were faithful in giving to do the things that God has asked us to do. We would never have to ask to give. Ever. But the reason that we do, those of us who are trying to be real and honest about biblical giving, and as pastors, we're trying to live lifestyles that Christ has asked us to live, and stop trying to be like society as well. Those churches, we're trying. And I believe Avenue is one of those churches that we are trying to be really biblically focused on being good stewards of what we've been given. And I'm asking you, and I'm pleading with you to have a heart, listen to me, for kingdom expansion. We're in this for the kingdom. We're not in this for my kingdom. And we're not in this for your kingdom. These are hard words. And Jesus' words are hard. The question is who's your master? Now, so here's what we're going to do. I've already been in a season of prayer and fasting myself, leading up to this series. And let me just say it this way: if God doesn't show up in this series, we're going to fail. That's all I know. And I'm scared out of my mind, but that's because of my weaknesses, not his, right? And so I'm believing and trusting that God is going to do things through Avenue over the next weeks, next few months. Actually, to be honest with you, what we're going to talk about in this series will probably impact the next few years. And I'm absolutely nervous, and I'm trusting that he's going to do what only he does, and he does it all the time, and he always goes above and beyond. And our job is to be utterly faithful. In order to be utterly faithful, we got to begin to work out our heart and work on the point of what our heart is all about. So, we're going to have 2 challenges that begin tomorrow. It's absolutely free. Okay? Come on, breathe. It's okay I'm not asking for your money today, but there's something that I want you to know, that in order to get to where we're going to have to work out what we're going to do and move into a direction of trusting the Lord and doing these things that God, I think, will learn an incredible deal. Which is why we have the kids in here today, because I want the kids to absolutely challenge us as adults as well to help make this happen. In order to get there, I want to show you a video first. Take a look at this.
Then the king would say to those on his right, "Come, you are blessed by my Father. Take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invited you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me."
The Matthew 25 challenge was a transformational moment for my family and I. There's one particular day when the challenge was to sleep on the floor. And I walked by my daughter's room, and she was already there on her sleeping bag, reading her Bible.
The Matthew 25 challenge was an incredibly spiritual experience for me personally. God was teaching us different things every day, and sharing it with each other was really exciting.
Well, when it came to the Water Day Challenge, 3 words come to mind: caffeine, withdrawal, headaches. Going without coffee all day was a lot harder than I thought. I'd get these headaches, but every time I did, it would remind me of the 6-kilometer walk that women and children have to do to get unclean water.
My first thought was, this will be easy. I grew up missing meals and sleeping on the floor, but my daughters, not so much. They were challenged to come out of their Wi-Fi life and actually experience what kids around the world experience every single day.
Okay. So the first challenge is we're going to do the Matthew 25 challenge. Now, the reason this is so important is what we're going to be doing next Sunday. Now, I'm challenging you. Kids in the room, let me wave your hands, wave your hands. Come on, shout. Let me hear you. Scream out there, kids, okay. I know next hour we're going to have tons, so like, oh my goodness, right? So, but here's what I want to say. You need to help keep mom and dad accountable, aunt, uncle, grandmas and grandpas, everybody else in here. If you're in a group and things like that, I want you to challenge yourself. So here's what we want you to do. If you text, get out your phones right now. Come on, get them out. Come on, let's go. I'm not seeing movement. I see some. Come on, get those phones out. I want you to text Avenue M25 to this number, 56170. You're going to then receive a text message, and you're going to, every day you're going to get a devotion, and along those things, you're going to get a challenge in what we're going to be doing that day. If you don't have, you're like, well, I'm not really a big phone guy. That's okay. On your way out, you will also receive this. If you don't want this, you don't have to have it, especially if you've texted a number. But you can take this, and this will help you do it. Look at me, I need 100% participation. Is everybody with me? Come on, let me see. Is everybody with me? Like, this is the point of what we're trying to do. Our goal is if we want to change heart and we want to grow in faith, we're going to have to do things and take steps in order to get to a place of doing what God has asked us to do as men and women, as families, and teaching and training our kids. I'm telling you, this is an incredible way to disciple one another, incredible way to disciple our children. Children, this is an incredible way to disciple your mom and dad. Right? Like, these are the things that we want you to begin doing. So you will get one of these on your way out, and we're going to make sure, like, hey, did you get one? Did you get one? Did you sign up? We're going to be that way. And so they're going to be right there on the doors when you walk out, so that you can get one of these as well. Now, here's the thing, is we want your kids to be involved with this. Now, there's a few things that I'm going to be honest with you that, it's going to be really hard for them to do because we don't really want them to do it. One day is you're going to have to fast from food and drink only water. We want to make sure your kids are eating, okay? So, those are the things that we just want you to be able to work with your kids and then work as one another, and we expect everyone in the church to do this because this is going to shape what we're doing next Sunday, so you understand what we're going to experience. So, it's got everything marked out for you of what's going to take place over the next 6 days. That's going to end then on day 7, which is next Sunday, okay? The second thing we're doing is this, a 21 days of prayer and fast. We're going to begin tomorrow, 21 days of prayer and fast that will end on the last Sunday of Be Generous. And the reason is because if God doesn't show up, we're going to fail. I'm telling you, if God doesn't show up in the things that we're going to be doing in the next few weeks, it's going to fail. And so we need collectively for God to do the things that we're going to do. So what does that mean for you? Every day, if you get onto our church app, every day there is a new, it'll say day 1, and there is a devotion on there that you can go through and do with your family. The Matthew 25 is only 1 week. This is going to be for 21 days. So I want you as a family to decide what can we fast from? What can we do to get rid of something in our life so we can focus on Jesus? If you want to go to the fullest and fast 21 days without any food, then do it. But at the end of the day, maybe you should see a doctor first if you're not ready for that, okay? Charlie's right over here. He'd be happy to see you. Woody's back there. They'll be happy to see you. I was like, oh my goodness, I don't want to forget you. And so the idea is that we have 3 in here that you could see right now, and they make sure that you can figure those things out. But anyways, you'll do it for free though, right? Right? You guys will all do it for free? I'm just saying. So anyways, those things, I want to make sure that you are ultimately aware of the things that are going to take place, of what we're going to do through. So the 21 days of prayer and fast is going to be something. Every morning at 6:30 a.m., one of our pastors is going to get up and go live on Facebook and walk through the devotion that day. Not necessarily going to take you through through it, but they're going to also pray along online, and they're going to talk about what it is that God put on their heart that day as it comes along with that. No, you don't have to get on 6:30. It'll be up all day long. So our goal, again, is to make sure that if we're going to be a generous follower of Jesus kind of church, then you and I have to make it a point to do what God has asked us to do based off of what we just talked about today. Is everybody with me? I'm excited. I don't know. Are you guys excited? Like, this is what it's going to take. And I'm telling you, the things we're going to talk about, there are things right now during this series that I don't even know yet, but by week 3, I will know. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to bring a lot of that to you. And so the only way this is going to work is by God showing up and our hearts are open and ready. I'm scared, man. I wish I could tell you what we're doing. I'm super excited, but I want to trust and believe that the Holy Spirit's going to do what he does, okay? Let me pray for us. Father, today, Lord, we want to be a Bible-believing, truth-oriented, grace-oriented congregation. That we don't want to be at the extremes of truth, and we don't want to be at the extremes of grace. We want to live in the tension of both and. So, Father, I pray right now, I pray for the kids in the room right now, that they are excited to do this Matthew 25 challenge. They're gonna teach us what it is to be faithful to our Heavenly Father. Lord, I pray as a congregation that every single person in this room will take the challenge, because some of the things that we know we're going to have to do this week are going to be hard, and we're going to have to let our pride go in order to do some of the things you're going to ask us to do this week. Lord, I pray that even this week that we'll have gospel conversations with people because of some of the things we're going to have to do. I pray that it opens the door for your kingdom to grow all over this community. So God, thank you so much for what you're going to do. Thank you for this church. Thank you for our kids. And be with us and help us to enjoy the next 6 days leading up to next Sunday. Help us to come back ready with a grateful heart and an exciting heart to see what it is that we're going to be doing next week as well. God, we love you. Thanks for all these things in Jesus' name. And all God's people said, amen.